Pesto is one of our very favorite things to preserve from out of our garden. So today we are going to be preserving as much pesto as we possibly can to put in our freezer and keep for the winter. Pesto is super easy to make, and I think it only gets better as it sits in the freezer for a while. So let me show you how easy this is to make as we preserve some of the basil from our garden. So when we make pesto, we don't use pine nuts. You can, that's the traditional way to do it, but pine nuts are really expensive, so I tend to just use walnuts. We get a huge bag at Costco, and then I just portion it out into these smaller bags and freeze it, and they'll last forever that way. So I'm going to be making a huge batch of pesto. I have my regular recipe listed down below, but for today I'm going to be like quadrupling that recipe. So I need to pour at least a cup of these walnuts into my hot pan. We're going to dry roast them and get them ready to make the pesto. So while the walnuts are toasting over there on the stove, I'm going to go ahead and chop up this garlic. We're going to need about 1 to 2 cloves per batch. And again, I want to make like a quadruple batch, so I'm going to use this full head. So for today's pesto, I am just using straight lettuce leaf basil, that's it. But you could definitely mix different kinds of basils in your pesto. You could put in some parsley. I've heard of people doing onion top pesto. I've heard of people doing nasturtium pesto. Kind of the sky's the limit of what kind of greens you want to use in your pesto. Arugula pesto. There's so many different greens you can use in your pestos. Let me know down below what kind of greens are your favorite, but today we're just using lettuce leaf basil. The thing that I absolutely love about this lettuce leaf basil is how big the leaves actually are. You get a lot more bang for your buck because you're not washing tons of little tiny leaves. So that's what I have. I also really enjoy the flavor of this. It has a nice, like, traditional basil flavor. So for each batch of pesto, you want to do about 2 cups of basil. I'm eyeballing it. Like I said, the recipe's down below. We're going to add in some olive oil now. Then we're going to add in our walnuts. Now we're going to add in some lemon juice and lemon zest if you like. And I'm going to add in a little bit of salt. Now we're going to start blending it in our food processor, and we'll see if we need more oil, and we'll give it a taste and add in the cheese. So this definitely needs more oil, so I'm going to add that in. And then I'm also going to add in more of the basil. I'm going to try and make as much as I possibly can at once. Now that I have all of the basil in there, I'm going to also add in our cheese. Today I'm using parmigiano reggiano. Sometimes we use pecorino romano. It all depends on what cheese you have available to use. Either of them taste really good in here. And both of them are pretty cheap at Costco. You just want to make sure when you're using parmigiano reggiano that you don't use this part right here. This is the rind and it's really hard. That's good to save though. I'll throw that in soups later and have it cooked down. That adds really nice flavor, but you don't want that in your pesto. It smells really good. You like pesto? You want to come taste it and tell me if it's okay? Come here. Wanna try it? You like that? Pretty good? I think it needs more salt and more lemon. All right, I think it needs more brightness, so we are going to add in lemon zest and a whole nother lemon. And I also think it needs a little bit more salt. That's why it's important to taste test everything. And also you need to remember that with the pesto, the flavors do meld as it sits. So if you put this in your freezer and let it sit for the next month before you use it, it's gonna taste even better than it does right now. It only gets better with time. Okay, so the only way to preserve pesto is to freeze it. So sometimes I use little plastic containers to freeze it in. I don't have those today, but you can also use jars, and that's what we're gonna do. I have these weck jars, and then when we run out of space in these, then I'm gonna move on to probably some half-pint jars. So I'm gonna go ahead and start pouring it into jars, and we'll see how far that gets us. All right, so I ridiculously thought that I could pour it straight into this jar, which I absolutely cannot. So we're gonna do the smarter thing and use a funnel. So you want to make sure you don't fill them too high. Like this one, for instance, is just a little bit too high. You don't want it to expand and break your glass jar. So theoretically, you wouldn't have made such a big mess when you do this, but I totally did. So we're going to clean these up, and then we're going to put the lids on. And then these little clips just go right on. Now I'm gonna go ahead and fill up ball jars because I still have a lot of this left, and we're gonna see how many jars we can get total. All right, so just come over here and I'm gonna show you how easy it is to make a side dish with pesto. I'm gonna add a good heaping scoop of salt into our boiling water. Then I'm gonna pour in some organic pasta. So while our pasta is boiling, I'm gonna go ahead and start on the other components of this side dish. So I'm just gonna use this pan we toasted the walnuts in. I'm gonna add in some butter, let that melt down, and I'm gonna start cooking our peas so they're not frozen. Our noodles are finished cooking, so we're going to just scoop them out and put them over here into our peas. Now I'm gonna take the pesto that we have left over, and I'm just gonna pour that right on top. Give that a good stir. And then I'm gonna drizzle on a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, a little tiny sprinkle of salt, and some cracked black pepper. Now we're gonna go back over to the island, and I'm gonna dish this up. I'm gonna top this with some Parmesan cheese shavings. That's how easy it is to make a delicious side dish with your pesto. I'm gonna give this a try. That pesto is so good. That's probably one of my all-time favorite things. Like I said, pesto just tastes like summer. It's got like a nice bright freshness to it. You can't go wrong with pesto. It's pretty much good with everything. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, go right here and watch how we make my very favorite pesto paninis. Bye, guys. Funnel doesn't fit. What the heck? The funnel doesn't fit. Okay.
You have to hold it.
That's fine. We'll do that.